Good evening. I'm Reynolds Ferrante for George Washington University, presenting a series in Managing Computer Applications as part of the Mind Extension University series. The theme of our 15 sessions is Improving Administration Through Computing. In our first session, Visions of the Future, we had a series of speakers who talked about their vision of where office automation and computing, which would support it, would be in the next few years. We were very pleased to have Mr. Stephen Chase, President of America Online, speak to us about what America Online will be doing over the next 4 or 5 years to provide an increasing series of important services to office managers, and in particular, how using through America Online, one could access the world through BitNet and Internet. We're pleased also to have Mr. Bill Gates, President of Microsoft Corporation, talk about the new technology and how the new technology would make an important difference in offices not only talking to one another, but in talking to offices all over the United States. In session 3, we're also pleased to have Dr. Franz Eberhardt, who was the Secretary General of the International Association of Universities, talk to us about the whole range and realm of international telecommunications and how universities throughout the world will be able to talk to one another. As part of tonight's session, the world of information resources, we're very pleased to have Dr. Ann Caputo, who is the manager of academic programs for DIALOG Information Services. And I'd like you to introduce yourself and to talk a little bit about the growth of information technology through DIALOG.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrante. I'm pleased to be with you tonight. We're going to be talking about access to information via a wide variety of automated means. This means instead of traveling by foot to the library or the bookstore or other places where you've found information in the past, we're going to be looking at the use of computers and telecommunications to expand the world of information access to large data banks and other places where information is stored. My company, DIALOG Information Services, is sometimes called the world's largest knowledge bank. And that can really mean a giant warehouse or storage place where information of all kinds is available for anyone who has a computer and a modem.
Thank you, Ann. There are several factors which are beginning to influence office automation in ways we never thought possible before. First of all, information has been growing and will continue to grow exponentially. Information storage is now better managed than ever before, but access continues to be a difficult problem. Information from DIALOG and from other information services, as well as from our libraries, is now being converted from hard copy, text, and documents to automation, and it's becoming more readily available to more and more users throughout the world. We'd like to look for a second at some of the factors that have contributed to the growth of information technology over the last few years. In our first chart, we're going to be looking at computers and auxiliary equipment sales to business and industry and how they have grown from 1962 to 1990. And I know that you've worked extensively in this field. Perhaps you'd like to cover some of the key factors that have contributed to this growth.
The bar graph that you're viewing is particularly interesting because it starts with a landmark year, and that is 1962, when we were really talking about the use of computers for number crunching, for massaging numeric information, and were primarily single-site installations or mainframes, sometimes customized to particular uses. By the middle of the 1960s, by about 1967, we began to see the idea that anyone could own a computer. A computer could be something you would have on your own desktop, at home, or in your office. But those early computers were mostly built from single kits. They were not purchased off the shelf, ready to use as they are now, but were purchased in pieces and assembled together in kit form. By 1972, another important event took place, and that is the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, made a decision to deregulate the use of telephone lines for use for data transmission purposes in addition to voice transmission. By deregulating the price and cost of this service, they made possible widespread data transmission over very inexpensive telecommunication links. And that made possible the growth and distribution of databases as an economic business decision important. It's also important that in that year, 1972, DIALOG and several other information services began as commercial entities. By the end of the 1970s and on into the 1980s, computers began to be sold for desktop purposes with modems installed. That meant that the computer industry itself thought that many people will be using these machines for telecommunications purposes. And you can see in the bar graph that the use and sale of these devices grew at an astounding rate up to the present day, when computers with modems and other multimedia devices are now part of a standard computer setup.
Another important factor in looking at the growth of automation is the amount and number of sales, including computers, that has taken place over the last few years. In this chart, we're going to look at some of the factors that have contributed to this particular growth from 1962 to 1991. And what are some of the factors in your judgment that really contributed significantly to the growth of electronic sales?
I think the fact that computers were readily available off the shelf, so you could use them without being extremely knowledgeable about their contents and how they went together, and the growth of a large number of computer applications. Not only the use of computers for word processing and spreadsheet analysis, but also to communicate with remote databases like DIALOG, communicate via bulletin boards and electronic mail with other people, and of course we can't discount the use of computers for recreational purposes, including the use of computer designed games.
One other factor that's very important is to look at the revenue. In this particular case, we're going to look at the revenue worldwide of computer and business systems, the ones that have been sold from 1981 to the year 2002. Let's look for a second at this trend. First of all, it's not just in the developed countries, but it's in all countries. A key factor here is that in the next 20 years, the revenue will increase 9 times to over $900 billion. There's some other factors that are really important, and that is that in order for automation to function correctly, be it in an office or a university or a country, there has to be a critical technology mass. And that mass is now beginning to be achieved in many different countries. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that critical technology mass, if you would, please.
I think what you mean when you use that term, and I especially like that term because I think it describes exactly what is happening, is that computers are now an essential part of office functions. It's not something that some offices have or that it is a frill or nice thing to have, but it is an essential basic part of that function. Not only for the commonly understood things like word processing and data analysis, but also for all kinds of communications. International networks like the internet play an important role in that faculty members, students, administrators, and people in the business world too, or simply people at home, can communicate with virtually any other person on the globe having access to a computer, a modem, and a telephone line. These communications take the form of electronic mail, bulletin boards, even fax types of dissemination of textual information, graphics, and illustrations. We're also talking about the growth of databases, storage, manipulation, and retrieval of information on these databases. Databases so vast that no single library has access to all these resources in print form.
One of the big factors in managing office automation now and certainly in the foreseeable future will be how the office manager can make better informed decisions than ever before using automated technology. There are three factors which contribute to that. The first factor is that the equipment is becoming better all the time. In fact, it's becoming so very good that sometimes the equipment outstrips the possibility of some of the software that we currently have and are using. This trend is going to continue. We talk now about the 486s. Intel is certainly talking about its Pentium CPU. This trend will continue. Most hardware equipment manufacturers will continue along this very dynamic trend, and we'll continue to see on a monthly basis, if not a daily basis, changes in equipment that will make life easier in offices. The second is lower costs. For every brand new piece of equipment that's developed, older equipment that's sitting around will cost less. And this is an important factor when you want to expand your automation. As your volume grows, you have a general decrease in cost. The third thing that's really important is better use of people. We believe that through automation, productivity will take unprecedented jumps in the next few years. The use of word processors, or what we call word processors, have turned into a vast array of modules which will allow secretaries, managers, staff in offices to do a better job than they ever did before. We use spreadsheets, we have graphics. All of these things that were not possible before to have in a single office are now all housed in a single office unit. As a result of this, we can vastly increase productivity. One of the key factors is the development of databases. And I'd like you to just talk a little bit about some of the factors that have contributed significantly to the development of databases.
I think it's particularly interesting that the convergence of computer technology and the growth and appearance of databases happened at roughly the same time and grew in some cases out of the same drive and technology. The use of databases as we know them now is actually an offshoot of several space exploration efforts that took place back in the early 1960s. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the US, and the European Space Agency, ESA, both funded extensive efforts to provide ways of using computers to manipulate not just numeric data, but textual data in a way that would help them organize and control access to large numbers of technical reports that were being funded as a result of space exploration. In parallel with this effort, the National Library of Medicine funded a large amount of study and research to promote access and use of medical literature throughout the world. And at the same time, the Ohio Bar Association pioneered the use of computers to disseminate legal information. So we can see basically three trends coming together, converging at the same time to create large amounts of data available in electronic form to be searched from remote locations. These efforts, it is key to note, were all designed to promote textual manipulation and not numeric manipulation. The fact that communications became inexpensively available in the 1970s, and the fact that computers were also now widely available beginning in the mid to late 1970s, brought all these trends together.
Key to the development of the world of information resources is how one can have access quickly and efficiently to the vast array of information and databases which now exist and which are continuing to expand. Dr. Caputo's presence here today is very important because Dialog has done as much as any corporation in the area of information technology to look at the whole issue of how one can have access to the information quickly and efficiently to improve the whole decision-making process. And we're going to be dealing with that today. What we're going to be doing is looking at a problem that we feel many office managers have. If you look on your notes, there is a problem for a dialogue search. I'm going to be taking a few minutes, and due to the importance of this, I'm going to actually read this to you so that you can get an understanding of exactly how important this is. Our concern here is that we have a manager of an office concerned with the administration of personnel. And this manager needs to upgrade all of his current computers that are currently, for the most part, 286s. The current configuration can no longer handle the growing number of records, and the requirements to automate more functions for local, state, and federal reporting has become very difficult. Also, there is an increase in the number of specific requests that cannot be met within the current configuration. The manager has made a decision to purchase the best 486s that can be purchased. This will include networking software. Most computers in the office, as I mentioned, are not networked. The primary function of the office is to manage company information on personnel. The office has 16 people, including managers and staff. Among the functions carried out in this office, and for which the upgrade is aimed, are database control for all personnel, record maintenance for 200 people in the company, data collection and reporting on personnel matters, and for the development and control of information regarding personnel issues. Some of the questions that the manager asked, which we'd like to address through doing a database search of Dialog, are what are the best buys in the 486 field? What configurations are technically excellent? What kinds of costs are there? What companies sell the products, and who are the vendors? What I'm going to ask Dr. Caputo to do today is to do a search on Dialog. We're going to have you look at this search as we go through so that you can see the process that one takes in accessing a very large number of databases to get the correct information. And I'd like you at this time to work with me as we go through this, and we'll get into Dialog first. It'll take a couple seconds. One of the things that we're doing here is we're in a Windows environment, and what I'm doing is taking us out of the Windows environment. The particular program that we want to use is a DOS-based program, and we can't operate it from Windows directly. So we'll be getting into this program now. And Ann, I'm going to ask you at this time, if you would, just to go ahead and get into it. What we have done is we've set up a search strategy. We have set up a search strategy that are in your notes. And in that search strategy, you'll be able to follow the exact process that we go through, as well as to look at the kinds of a description of the databases for every aspect of what we'll be looking at today.
Well,
go ahead, Ann, please.
While Dr. Ferrante was talking, you probably heard the modem dialing the number. This is a local telephone number for most of you in most cities, also is accessed via an 800 number and also via the internet worldwide. It's now dialing the number and establishing the connection between our computer and modem here and the database storage facility in Palo Alto, California. Its exact location, and in fact our location, is not important, but it is dialing the number and it is sending in my secret password and user number, account number, so that it knows I'm a bona fide user. It's now established the connection, and in a moment is going to send me a message asking me which databases I wish to query. The decision to choose databases and select from among over 400 databases is in fact a fairly important part of the process that we're going to be discussing in a few moments. But for purposes of our search today, we have selected 3 databases that deal in part with either the communications and computer industry, with microcomputers, or computers in general. The prompt that you see at the bottom of the screen, or will see in a moment, indicates that Dialog is waiting for me to issue some instructions. The command I've entered is the word begin, and it's asking me to enumerate which databases I want to search. And those would include databases that deal, as I said, with the computer industry, with general industrial and statistical information about computers, and so on. There are 3 databases being searched simultaneously: computer database, microcomputer index, and trade and industry ASAP. You'll notice also after the name of the database is a date or time span indicating when the database started and how current it might be. Most of these are current through today or at least sometime during this week, providing you with very up-to-date information on this subject. The search strategy that I'm going to search for, ask it to search for, is the word microcomputer. I'm going to place a question mark at the end of that word, meaning I'll accept any ending to that word. I've also asked for the term or the number 486 and the word purchase. And I'm also going to place a question mark at the end of that term and evaluate. It searches through every word in the text of several hundred journals and other kinds of business and news sources for these words. Words could be in the title of the article, they could be in the summary or abstract of the article, they could be keywords, which computer people call descriptors, or they could simply be words somewhere in the text of the article. The word "and" that connects these terms indicates that all of these terms must be present. So microcomputer, or any ending to that word, and the number 486, and the word purchase, or any ending to that word, and the word evaluate. This allows us to search very precisely for articles that contain every one of these 4 elements. And while it is searching, it's sending me a message saying processing. This means that it's waiting in a queue with dozens, if not hundreds, of other users who have similar requests, looking through literally hundreds of thousands of sources for this exact configuration, for this exact match. When we get an answer, we'll know roughly in these 3 databases how many records or how many references contain all 4 of these words. And you might notice, if you look at the screen, that it is searched through hundreds of thousands of sources. And the combination at the end, step 5, indicates that there are 364 sources that have this precise configuration, these 4 terms together. Now,
yes, Ann, excuse me. I was wondering, could we narrow the search down to just the last couple of years?
Yes, I think that's a good idea because we're really only interested in very current material. I'm going to ask that only things published in 1992 or 1993 be found. It's going to then take the 364, examine their publication date, and determine whether there are any that are very current. We also know that when we get an answer, the first references we look to will be the most current. So automatically the newest information appears first. It looks like we've narrowed it down now to 175, so less than half of the total.
What about this possibility? Let's just look, if you don't mind, at one reference and see what we come up with. And let's look at that reference and see whether or not it answers the questions that we're hoping we can answer.
Let me have this scroll up on the screen and then I'll stop it as it gets close to the top.
Okay.
Good. This looks good.
Okay, let me see.
It comes from a March 1993 publication called Computer Reseller News, and the title is Vendors Chart Future as New PC Era Dawns. Priced around $5,000, machines hit the streets in mid-May. And it's also an article that contains illustrations and a table.
Well, that's really nice in a sense, but the thing that really that's really important to me is the fact that our office manager is looking for 486 base machines, and it says fully configured 486 base machines by comparison cost around $1,500. So, and it also says that some resellers worry that the Pentium may have an ill effect on the 486 market, as corporate customers adopt a wait-and-see approach to purchases as they evaluate Pentium systems. However, Intel does expect to ship hundreds of thousands of Pentium microprocessors in 1993. So let's just ship one there if you would. Let's just take a look at another one.
Next most current one is coming out, and I'll stop it again as it reaches the top of the screen so we can read the title. This comes from PC World, May 1993, and it is actually an evaluation, which was one of our key requests.
This is pretty good in a way because this article is exactly on target with what our manager is really interested in doing.
That's right.
It says here that the fastest number crunching PCs are around 3,000, and it also indicates the 5 best computer buys, which is exactly what our manager was interested in putting into his office. Let's take a look.
Let me move the text up here.
Yeah,
so
please
you can
move
see.
it up. Okay, here we are right here. We have some products that 25 of the fastest 8486 base machines that sell for no more than 3,000 are especially good at handling spreadsheets and other applications that require tremendous processor power are evaluated. And it mentions what they are and gives you a baseline price. This is important, and it also indicates here that with the full text that it has a complete evaluation for a fairly large number of these 486 machines.
Right, the table lists the companies and also the list price. Let's look at just one more.
Okay.
This comes from Federal Computer Week, a slightly older issue, December 14th, 1992, and it also is an evaluation.
It's pretty good. Alpha Systems Laboratories has a 486 smart terminal microcomputer for 1,900, 120 megabyte hard disk. Let me see, from Electronic Systems Corp. Well, that's for the Army. Let's take a look. Okay, I think that's a little more specific than we're looking for. Is there maybe one more article?
Let's try one more. Comes from Corporate Computing, March 1993, also an evaluation. And this one has the full text of the article available instantly online.
That's really helpful because it indicates here in the abstract that there's 6 8046 based network servers that were tested and evaluated on 120 local area network handling a heavy client server application. This might be of interest. I think the first article probably had more information for the person to get the full text than this, but I think all these articles would be important to a manager who wanted to make an important decision.
Right.
Okay, I think that's really helpful.
Now at this point, I could continue to look at these one by one. I could store this electronically on my hard disk, or I could even ask that it be printed and sent to me in the mail. When our search is completed, the exit command is log off. Log off will also give us some indication of the amount of connect time and price. I want you to take a quick look at this. This is actually pretty amazing. We've spent 166 thousandths of an hour connected to these three databases, including the telephone call and viewing the view of the data and the connect time. We spent less than $25, $22.74
to get us all this, to get us all this information.
Right.
Well, this is so important to me that even if I were going to buy a single computer for myself, I would want to take a look at Dialog. It certainly would make sense for me. I wouldn't have to go hunting through journals and magazines and articles in order to get this information. I think it is important. There is another thing, Ann, and what I would I have a sort of a program that I use when I have a large amount of information, and I'm going to download these 166 articles very quickly into a little package that I have, and I'm going to query the articles to see if I can do a better job in coming up with the information. So let
me get you out of this program and you can move
Please.
into your program.
Thank you. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes normally to download this information into this little package that I have. And now I'm going to go through and I'm going to ask this package first of all to go through every single article, 170 articles I believe, Ann. And what I'm going to ask it to do when it does it is to give me a frequency analysis of every single key word that would be important to a query in this particular field, and to let us see the kinds of information that it has. And it does it very quickly. And there we are right there. And some of the key descriptors that come out are file servers, price, systems. And you've already seen just a few minutes ago what those articles look like, but I'm going to sort of lead you through one. I'm going to just deal with price for a second. And let's go through. And what it does is it takes price and it produces additional descriptors under that. And it also lets you see, if you see a little sort of arrow at the end, that's an actual article. What you also see are other keywords that are related to price. So under price it would be low, industry, computer aided, and design. In the case of performance, which was one of the questions that our manager had, let's just take a look and see, let's just see what that is. Okay, there's two things. Evaluation of the industry. Let's see what that article looks like. And here's one on Gateway. Gateway edge is compact in price performance. Dell not as impressive even with lower price. And so it gives you information. And again, I haven't changed anything. This information came directly from Dialog. And that's important to see. If, however, you also wanted to query it, suppose you were interested in an IDE controller, you could simply query the whatever information was there, and it wouldn't matter how long it was. And you could then ask the question, if you put in IDE, let's see if there it is right there. So it took us directly to IDE controller. And if there are occurrences of that particular string, you could find anything that you wanted within this article. But there's one other feature that I think is very, very important. And the other feature has to do with being able to ask specific questions of all of the information and come up with your precise question. And I'm just going to do one. I'm going to ask it whether or not it could help me find the best buys. Oh, there it is. So it went through all my articles, and it came up with best buys. And if I'm correct in this, is this not the first article that you pulled up?
Yes, it is. It
Okay.
is, exactly.
So we have a couple different ways to go about this. One way we can do this is to go through the articles. Another way is we can put this information into a file so that we can produce hard copy if we need to, or to find the exact article or articles that really make most sense for us. You don't want to store this information because, unfortunately, in this particular field, the information doesn't really last very long. Sometimes it's only good for a period of a month, if not several weeks. But it does allow you, using some of the text manipulation programs that are out there, to be able to access that information in a way so that you can ask questions of it. And that really is the function of this particular program.
I need to chime in here also and say a word about copyright, and that is you have stored this temporarily for a one-time use. And after you're finished looking at the articles and creating your outlines and producing a printed copy, that disappears from computer storage. It isn't kept permanently because copyright regulations do not allow you to do that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ann, for that. I'm going to go back now into our presentation. It'll take just a couple seconds to do this. Again, what we're doing at this time is we're going into Windows again, into PowerPoint, which is the program, and that's part of the music that comes with that at the same time. And I'm going to be going through a procedure that you'll see a number of times on this series, which is to enter my password into the system. And get back into PowerPoint at this time. One of the things about PowerPoint that's very nice, you can take a look at several pages at one time to get to the exact slide that you're looking for. In this case, it's slide 9. Was it? I'm sorry, it's not slide 9. Okay. Okay. One of the questions that people raise, particularly office managers, is how much more does it cost to have somebody do the search manually if we're trying to move to 486s compared to doing it using automated mechanisms such as DIALOG. And we're going to talk just for a few minutes about that. And then we're going to show you a comparison chart and let you make the decision as to whether or not automation will really make a difference as we move into improving our decisions through automation. What about the manual search strategy? Does it still make sense? Well, in some offices it does. If you're not automated, then certainly doing it the manual way is something, the process is really a familiar process. The results, however, are not always predictable because someone could be in the library for several days and you still may not be able to come up with the article. And there's certainly no way for someone to look through 170 articles to determine which of those articles make more sense. And for that matter, they might come up with thousands of articles even if they used a electronic card catalog. That's certainly not the way to do it. Automation does have some advantages there. Another problem with the manual system is that almost everything is based on the use of personnel. This is expensive. There's no way to predict the total amount of time that it will cost to support personnel to carry out the search. And you're not even sure when you're done whether or not you have the correct information. Also, the issue of time. How soon do you need to do this? Does the manager want to make a decision in the next couple of days, or does the manager want to wait a couple of months? This is something that, of course, only a manager can office. We think, however, that the manual system may not always be the best system in terms of the future. Let's take a look at some of the factors that are important and those that come out as being critical when you do an automated search. And why don't you talk a little bit about this?
By automated searches, we mean the process that we were just discussing, that is using databases either in remote form, such as dialogues, or on CD-ROM, or even locally mounted in your institution. Automated searches tend to be very comprehensive. You have access to literally hundreds of databases, and each database might be thought of as a complete library in itself. Even the world's largest libraries, like the Library of Congress, don't have access to all these resources internally. We also know that databases can be updated at many different intervals, including as time passes, because computer people call real time, hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. So the access is as things are published and are being made available in the public domain. Many databases are directly available via their complete or full text form online, and those that are not provide 24-hour document delivery via fax or some other more conventional way of delivering printed pages. And databases cover virtually every conceivable subject, from the sciences and areas of technology, such as the databases we were looking at, to businesses, including directories, social science topics, newspapers, government sources of information, and even recreational information sources. Because we're using powerful search logic, including the use of the AND notation and the software that allowed us to create relevance ranking, we are searching through literally hundreds of thousands of references, looking for things that precisely meet our profile. And by going through an interactive process of looking for answers, determining that our answers are too large and refining them by requiring that they come within a certain date range, we are able to refine and manipulate our sources immediately. You can also review this information with your manager, sitting there with you at the time of search and refining the search accordingly. And also realize that you have access to sources of information about companies and even individuals. Public companies and private companies are readily available online.
There's another factor, and that is, what does it really cost to do a manual search and an automated search? In this particular case, we're going to look at this search and to take a look at what it would cost someone to do it manually and what it just cost us to do it using DIALOG. What we have here is a comparison of the manual and automated search categories and costs. Let's take a look. We can see that the categories are the Chief Executive Officer, the search, the photocopy, which you'll notice in the case of DIALOG is not evident. There is no travel cost for DIALOG. You do everything in the office. In the case of either manual or automated, you certainly might have some shipping or postage cost and some fax. And in DIALOG, you would have simply the online time that you saw. We estimated that the total cost using the manual system would be around $500. In the case of DIALOG, including the CEO's time, the total cost was approximately half of that, or $250.
I think there are a couple of interesting observations here. One is that human resource time ends up being the single most expensive factor when you're looking at a manual search. The cost of simply hiring someone at a standard researcher's rate to do the manual search cost more than the entire search process online using DIALOG or a similar system. So you dramatically reduce the time it takes for a human being to cover these resources. and also search far more comprehensively than a researcher in a library or other kind of manual method.
One of the things that has become an increasing concern to managers is, do they really have the correct information they need to make a decision of this type? When you're spending thousands of dollars, you can't take a chance in not knowing comprehensively what the field is talking about. In the case of microcomputers, where a bad decision could cause you to spend a lot of money that you would quickly regret, there's a real advantage in using a system like DIALOG in order to give you the full range and comprehensive range of information that you really need to facilitate the kind of decision you would make. Do you want to have any last comments on this, Ann?
If you're wondering how to get access to these powerful databases, the first stop for most of you will be going to the library. A public library, a library within your company or organization, within your academic institution or your government agency. Students enrolled in this course will receive further information about specific sign-up procedures via their electronic bulletin board.
I'd like to thank you again, Ann, for spending the time today to talk to us about DIALOG as an information service, but also to talk about the broader world of information resources and where it's headed. We'll be continuing in a few minutes with other sources of information that are automated that can also facilitate making decisions on hardware, software, and improving management within the office unit.